And we're back. We're back. The Black Psychologist Podcast. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate everyone being here. I am one half of your humble and gracious host and clinician here for your listening pleasures, Dr. Kyle Osborne. He is I and I am him. And of course, never here by myself. I'm here with the one and only, the leader of this revolution. He's liberated forever, domesticated never. None other than Dr. Jason Coleman. How are you, good brother?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Can't complain, man. We got a couple of weeks of summer left, bro. I'm just trying to enjoy that. Other than that, I got nothing else to say. Just want to thank everybody for listening. We appreciate all the support. It's amazing every week. We're gonna keep the content coming.
Absolutely. Episode 25, man. We a quarter piece in. So I'm gonna highlight what you said. Thank everybody for watching, for listening, for commenting, for subscribing. Continue to send your comments, your support our way. The Black Psychologist Podcast at gmail.com. We appreciate everybody and their support. So continue to send it through because Dr. J and I love to interact. We love to get the feedback from everybody. So this is what we're here for. And you guys have any questions, any support or things you want to throw our way, we're with it. All right, ready to get this thing rolling?
Oh, definitely, man. Definitely, bro.
All right, cool. All right, man. So we're gonna start off with something that a lot of people are doing these days. All right, and that is the online dating scene. Okay, so research recently came out, and there was a study that was done that found that there is a positive association between symptoms of anxiety and depression, and to the extent of dating app use. All right, so.
Okay.
So just to kind of give you a background for people that aren't familiar with the online dating scene, let's talk about who these people are. Right. So the dating app Tinder reports 57 million users worldwide. All right. That's a lot.
That's Tinder.
Yeah, that's just Tinder. So that's just Tinder. So we're not even talking about some of the other ones that we talked about. Okay, Cupid. I think our last episode and some of the other different dating apps. Right. So that's just 57 million users worldwide along with Tinder. All right. So who are some of these online daters? All right. So most online daters are between the ages of 18 and 34, and most falling between those ages of 18 and 24. However, there has been a 60% increase between the ages of 45 and 55. And even those 55 and older, their usage has doubled on a lot of these dating apps also. So let's give it up for the middle-aged folks getting their courtship and dating on.
That's right, man. That's right. Jumping into it, man.
All right. So why do people do these dating apps, right? Why are people doing the online dating scene? All right. So 49% of online daters through a recent study said that they report that they're looking for marriage. So that's 49%. While the other 47% report that they are specifically just looking for casual sex. All right. So it's kind of like a half and half thing. Some folks are there just to get things done. The other half are there to actually looking for a meeting relationship. So, so some of the mental health aspect things that came out were reported were that people who are using dating apps are more likely to be distressed, anxious, or depressed, and those that do use dating apps face 3 times the amount of stress in comparison to non-users. In addition to that, participants also noted that they use dating apps in the pursuit of validation of self-worth.
Okay.
All right. And also it's associated with poor body image and the use of unhealthy methods of weight loss. So that's the mental health aspect of it. Jay, as you were reading through this article, what were some of your thoughts?
All right. So like you just talked about a whole lot of different, we could go a whole bunch of different ways, right? All right. So I'm going to just start with one part. You were just talking about how it was, I guess, associated with more distressed people, anxious people that are more vulnerable, I guess, to symptoms of depression, things like that, right? Increased symptoms. So that makes sense to me, right? When you're talking about, especially because they talked about that's associated with like increased use. So, you know, the longer you're on it, probably the more dating apps you're on, the more vulnerable you are to this, right? And what that got me thinking about is, like, again, you can't say that they're not serving their purpose and they're not useful, right? Because again, we said 50% of people, you know, are there to hook up, 50% of people are there to get married. And in the article, they said 30% of people that got married are reporting that they met on dating apps, right? Mm-hmm. So I would say if we just talking like just at those numbers, that's a pretty good rate in terms of like people that are going from dating app to actually going to the altar. So it is happening for some people, right? But in terms of just talking about why are these feelings kind of prominent amongst people that are using dating apps, to me, I don't necessarily think that those feelings are exclusive to dating apps. I think they would be exclusive to social media in general. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the reason why I say that is because there's a lot of things that are common to both social media and dating apps, right? That weren't common before. So even if we look at something like taking a picture, right? And I'm kind of bleeding. I'm looking at bear with me. I'm looking at both of them kind of in one at now. Before we used to like post a picture, look at a picture, Polaroid, put it in our album, whatever. It brings you some sense of relief when you see a nice picture of yourself or somebody else. Now, what's the difference? Whether it be dating app or whether it be Tinder or what one of these other dating apps that's a little bit more interactive, or like Facebook or something, we post a picture and then what? We wait for social approval, outside approval, right? Some people to make us feel good. By how? Mm-hmm. By what? Comments, by likes, right? All these different things, right? So again, what is that? How is that connected? Because it's gonna make you more likely to keep checking that app, keep checking the picture. How many people are looking? I'm not as happy, even if I look good in the picture. I'm not as happy because nobody is checking it out, right? How does this translate? I got a dating profile up, right? On, I don't know, Hinge, right? Nobody's checking it out. How do you think that makes me feel, right? Now, this isn't true, but I'm just saying, you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. Okay.
Right. So that's why I think it's really social media in general, you know what I mean? But you look, and again, online dating is effective, right? Because you have 50% of people who are identifying going there, you know, looking for marriage, and then overall you have 30% of people who are married talking about they met online. So I think that's a good point too, right? The pandemic has normalized online dating almost to the point of quote unquote regular dating, right? So, you know, it's a lot to talk about in this article, but this joint, I thought it was real interesting, man. What did you think when you was first, reading through it?
So I didn't think it was enlightening, right? First and foremost, just because of there were some intangibles or some aspects that I didn't initially think about. And even you alluded to some of those things as far as like taking the pictures or keeping up with your profile, because that's a lot of maintenance, right? Like before,
Right.
When you go on the dating scene, like in person, you making sure that you're presenting yourself correctly, right? You're presenting the best version of yourself as you go out. You make sure you're looking nice and things of that nature. But now you got a profile. So now you got to keep up with the profile. Like that's a lot of maintenance, whether it be the pictures, whether it be whatever your likes and your dislikes and whatever else is included. Like that's a lot of maintenance. And I imagine with all of that maintenance comes a lot of stress. Like you said, you're constantly checking who's liking, who's matching with your profile and that nature. And when the article mentioned how some people utilize it sometimes just as a measure of self-worth, or I'm thinking of the rejection piece, because think about it. Like in person, if you go to a spot and you notice someone like at the bar or at a restaurant or someplace, right, social club, and you think they're attractive. So what most people do is that, you go for the eye test, right? Like you look at them, you try to make eye contact with them, you try to give them the head nod or something. And if that person's not into you, they kind of ignore you, right? They kind of like look the other way, or they do something, they give you the look off, right? So that's one rejection that you're gonna get, right? One person that you're trying to make eye contact with, that person is not with it, so they reject you, right? That's one rejection. But if you're looking at with the dating apps, it's a situation where like you see dozens of people that you're like scrolling through, and you only match with those people whose profiles like yours also, right?
Right.
So like if you're not getting any matches, that's like 13, 14, 15 rejections that you could get within a day or within a week or however often you're on there. So like if you never match with the people that you like, I can see how it can feel like a continuous rejection. If people are perceiving themselves, like if you're measuring your self-worth, then you know what? That's gonna plummet. Like your anxiety is gonna, escalate because you're constantly thinking like, well, what's wrong with me?
Right.
What am I doing wrong? So, even though it's like you said, you got a decent percentage, like 30% is pretty good. That's a pretty decent success rate. However, now you got the other 70, or you got another large percentage of people who are like aren't getting that success. They're getting that constant rejection, and I can see how it can wreak havoc like on their mental health. So, it could hurt someone's, self-esteem, or like you said, it could help you find a mate. So I think it's kind of half and half, but that's tough, man. That's a lot of maintenance and a lot of work. I don't know if I'm cut out for something like that.
I mean, you know what? You make a lot of good points. I also would add, like, that's kind of just the foot in the door, right? Whether or not there's a lot of rejection associated with that potentially, but that's just meeting someone, right? Because some of these dating apps, you got to remember, when you look at when you start reading some of these articles about like people's dating styles on the dating apps, it's like most people, there's very few people that meet one person and that's the only person that they meet on a dating app and the only person they're talking to. Most people are talking to like several people at one time, right? Yeah. That's why we get the concept of like ghosting and all of that, right? So now, okay, you meet somebody that you like, all right? Now you're in a competition with God knows how many people, you know what I mean, talking to the same person. And remember, the day that they make a connection with anybody but you, most of them are not gonna like tell you, that, all right, I met somebody else. They're just gonna ghost you, right? So then there's a rejection associated with that, right? And with certain people, you don't know what the investment might be, right? Because for somebody like, say, person A, I might have been on dating sites for 5-10 years, right? So I know it's basically just vetting until you meet somebody in person. It's just vetting, right? Right. Or like talking to somebody in the comments section, right? That's how you should look at it, talking to somebody in the comments section, right? But for somebody else, they might really be like, I mean, I've been on dating sites before. So it's like some people, you may meet them within an hour, like, yo, they're telling you like pouring out like deep secrets to you. You know what I mean? And I don't remember any of these people's names now. I didn't meet any of them, those people, you know what I mean? So you don't know the level of investment different people are making is my whole point. So when that rejection comes, the impact is going to be different. So it's just an interesting conversation.
Yeah, you just mentioned like the competition aspect of things, right? So now, like you said, you're in constant competition with another profile, and like you're hoping, like there's so many different layers to it, where I could see how that could, have a very like stressful impact on an individual who is, say, looking for someone, right? Say someone is looking for, for marriage, or looking for a meaningful relationship, and if you're in constant competition with all these other different people, and like you said, you might have someone else on the other side who's just vetting, someone might be more invested in this dating app than someone else who's just kind of casually just kind of on there seeking, looking to hook up. So it really depends on, now you're looking at who's matching up with who or where you're at, right? As far as like who's looking for what type of relationship. Now, you mentioned something. You mentioned that you're on the dating apps, or you were. So so I so I gotta ask. In your experience, right? What do you prefer? Like, do you prefer the online or the in person? Are you that?
Well, I'll tell you this. Right now, I don't prefer anything because I'm not on anybody's dating site. But what I will tell you is,
look at this guy. Look at this dancer. I love it.
No, what I will tell you is this: when I was on a dating site, right, online, it would be, and I don't know. I'm just saying this because obviously it's a male perspective. I don't know how it looks from a female perspective.
Yeah, sure.
But I can't tell you how many people, anecdotally, I can say that I saw on their profile that said, "I'm just tired of people ghosting me. I'm tired of guys ghosting me." Like, so all I'm saying is It's an issue. It's probably an issue for some people, you know what I mean? Where they meet somebody, talk to them, think they met somebody nice, you know what I'm saying? And then I guess they,
Yeah.
Then kind of, the relationship just dissipates. Now, in terms of what you asked me before, in terms of what I would prefer, right? I think there's advantages to both, and I'm gonna tell you why. I'm gonna tell you as somebody who's, been dating out in the dating world, like I would say fairly recently, like we was in school and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Meeting somebody in person is always gonna have its advantages for the reasons that we all know, right? You can feel a person out, you can feel their energy. It's something about chemistry, where you might just bump into somebody spontaneously, on that night out with your friends and all of that type of stuff, right? So we all know about that. And then you see the person, and some people see, the man or woman of their dreams, right? Now, I think online has its advantages too because of like the reach, right? So it's like I could be in New Jersey and meet somebody, in South Carolina,
Mm-hmm.
or in London. You know what I'm saying? Your like parents couldn't do that. You know what I'm saying? So what that means in terms of finding somebody that's compatible to you, I think the possibilities are endless. Now you might have some limitations in terms of like seeing the person and all of that, but I think they both have their benefits, So nowadays, like if I was a young person coming up, I would utilize, as you see, young people, they utilize both equally. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah, for me now, I've never done the dating app. I've never gone that route.
Never.
I do never.
You never met anybody off
I'm old school, bro. I'm old school, man.
No. That's not old school. That's just old.
Yeah,
that too. Old.
That too. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that too. But I do see. I'm very traditional. Okay. Very traditional, conservative guy. I gotta look you in the eye. But
you never had a dating app on your phone.
Nah. I'm gonna tell you why. It's fear. It's fear-based. Okay. I was always fearful that whoever was on the other end, because you're presenting the best version of yourself. You can drum up yourself to be whatever you want to be. So like like me, if I'm dressing up the best version of myself, you might see me with the waves. You see what I mean? This might be like 2005, 2006 you see what I mean? But no, I was always fearful that whoever, like, say we meet up and we see the pictures, like, all right, everything's flowing, whatever conversations is going well. But I always fear that, like, all right, what, and this may sound pretty vain, but I'm always fearful of that. Whatever I'm seeing like online or whatever the profile pic is not going to be the same thing that walks in like when we meet up. Right.
So you listen.
That's a very, very limited, very kind of, you see what I mean? But that's something that was like for me. But I understand. I like the aspect where you can filter through of it. Like I do see that benefit of, as opposed to like when you meet somebody in person and kind of filling out those vibes. All right, doesn't work, and you got to go through like a whole dinner or a conversation or whatever the meeting circumstances are. Like you can filter through that via like through the dating app. So like you can find somebody you match with. So I see both sides of it. You see what I mean? But like me, I was always just, that fear was like, Like that was.
So you went through all of that to say that you were scared to get catfish, basically.
Yes. There it is. Scared to get catfish. I don't like cap. I don't like none of that.
Let me ask you this, and I'm not convincing you one way or the other, but video chat, man.
I mean, yeah, you're right. That's why I'm old, bro. I don't know what to tell you. Look, man.
That's why I said old. I'm
old, traditional.
Moving forward, we can move on. It's all good.
I'm seasoned, man. I'm traditional, but
No, I'm just messing with you. I'm just messing with you.
But yeah, it was interesting article. So I definitely
definitely, man.
So we'll continue to take a look at that and see how the apps go. Because you know what, something. Especially because you mentioned COVID earlier in the conversation, and I imagine that exploded even more because of the social distancing aspect of things. So since COVID is in play and we don't know how things are going to go, I imagine that a lot of these dating apps have seen an increase or a spike in, their membership and their enrollment or what have you because of COVID. So because you can't go out anymore. You can't do those same things that you would see people at different social gatherings. So, I mean, they're thriving for a reason. So, but it was an interesting article.
No, I believe it.
All right.
Definitely.
So moving forward. All right. On the politics. So Texas Governor Dan Patrick, a couple weeks ago, or more last week, came out and he blamed the COVID surge on African Americans that have not been vaccinated. All right. I'm going to read his quote. Said COVID is spreading, particularly most of the numbers are with the unvaccinated, and the Democrats like to blame the Republicans on that. Well, the biggest group in most states are African Americans who have not been vaccinated. Last time I checked, over 90% of them vote for Democrats in their major cities and major counties. So it's up to the Democrats to get as many people vaccinated. All right. That's what Dan Patrick said. So it's on the African Americans that haven't been vaccinated. All right, so let's just as we get into it, let's get the fake news out the way and check this. All right, so first and foremost, all right, Black people are about 13% of the total population and are not the biggest group of unvaccinated people in either Texas or in any other state in the U.S. So let's just get that out the way. All right. In actuality, through from the Texas Department of State Health Services, this stats from them. All right. White adults actually account for the largest share of unvaccinated adults. And particularly in his state of Texas, Black people actually represent 15% of the positive cases. Hispanics represent 52% of the positive cases, and white people represent 32% of the positive cases. So that's according to the Texas State of Health Services. So I just want to throw that out there. What's your take on this, Jay?
Listen, man, we won't have to spend too much time on this, but definitely we had to kind of shine a light on this. There's a couple of problems, obviously, with this, right? Number one is that it's factually wrong, right? And to kind of be stating things that are factually wrong on that type of platform, although not necessarily uncommon, is just irresponsible. But the second problem is that, I didn't see the whole show. But it did not appear that he was challenged by the host at all. You know what I mean? So if it's factually wrong, he's not challenged by the host. It leads me to like a couple of conclusions. It's either like neither one of them has the facts and they're both just ignorant, which could be possible, that they're both just ignorant. So maybe we should excuse them for just being ignorant, or they don't mind race baiting to score political points, right, with their audience. It's one or the other. They got to hold one or the other, right? I think I know which one it is, but everybody can make their own decision. But obviously it's shameful when you look at the actual numbers. They were kind of interviewing some scientists from like a local university, and they were saying when you look at the numbers, there's zero room for misinterpretation. Right. So obviously this is like a blatant attempt to, blame, the negative aspects of a pandemic on a group of people, right? Vulnerable people. And I take this personally, and it's a problem because in my personal life, when we're talking to people who are on, the fence about the vaccine and different things like that, they point at BS like this, and they say this is why we don't trust healthcare and people in leadership positions, right? Because we have somebody who has that type of title who will stand up on that type of platform and just blatantly tell lies, right? So when you have that, don't think it doesn't directly contribute to the quote unquote anti-vaxxers that we have, or people who are unsure legitimate science in our own, or in our own, places of business, you know what I mean? Or in our own circles. So it's irresponsible,
Yeah, I mean the statements, like, and you mentioned it, they're pretty much just offensive, they're racist and just flat out inaccurate. Disappointing, but not surprising, honestly. That he would rather, like you said, he would rather scapegoat black people than do the right thing as far as like working with local government to help, control the spread of COVID-19. So that he'd rather do that, like you said, kind of doing the race baiting than actually, it appears, do some work. But again, it's not surprising because Dan Patrick has a history of saying things like this, like just earlier in the month, he blamed undocumented immigrants for the rise in cases. So, I guess he's moved on from, the undocumented immigrants causing the spread or causing the rise to now it's African Americans. And I remember this was the same guy who, last year, and I think it was like April or May. This is when the virus had really started ramping up. He was on Fox News, and I remember he said that he said the U.S. should get back to work, right? So this is like April, May of 2020, and he's like, yeah, you know what? He's like, even though he said the U.S., he said people should get back to work, and even people over the age of 70, he said, now they can take care of themselves. Right. So, so he has a track record of saying, like you said, these irresponsible statements. And so I'm not surprised, because again, this is what's going to get the views and continue to say irresponsible statements. The thing that I'm concerned about, because you mentioned one aspect of it, of people, this was what contributes to the anti-vaxxers and them not trusting the government and not getting vaccinated. I'm concerned about the other extreme aspect of things, in that, this is going to give fuel to somebody to go out there and do something like outrageous and dangerous, right? Because we've seen a lot of radical behavior. So you can, I hope this doesn't happen, but when you have misinformation like this getting spread out into these different huge news outlets, I'm concerned that, you're going to have someone who's going to think that, oh, well, the community's got infected and it's due to black people. So I'm going to go out and I'm going to do something, based off of misinformation, and do something really dangerous and really harmful to someone. Because we've seen individuals that are ill-informed act out and do radical, violent behavior. So this is why that's the aspect that I'm concerned about when people start to take on this false information. And this shouldn't be ignored, because this continues to happen. This impacts people. People go out and make these terrible decisions, and this is how folks get hurt. So that's the aspect of it that I'm concerned about when people make these irresponsible statements.
Well, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I also think, like, one thing people will try to do in these instances is like say, well, this is just one instance, right? This is just Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Nobody else in position of power is doing this, right? We all know we don't have to go to the former president giving us multiple examples, right? Mm-hmm. We talked during when we spoke at NAMI, right? We spoke about the former Surgeon General Jerome Adams, right? I think it was April 4th, 2020. He was in a briefing room giving briefings about and general information about how all people should protect themselves about COVID-19, right? And then he decided to address African American and Latinx people and said, in addition to what he told everyone else, for us to stop with all the alcohol and drugs, right? And illegal drugs. Remember that?
Yeah.
That's why you're smiling, right? Because it was so absurd, right?
Yeah, that was out of control.
And he went as far as to say, look out, do it for your big mama, right? So this is as absurd, and this is a black dude, right? But we're talking about people that in positions of power who don't mind race baiting or saying things that are wrong factually, right? Because we know that in this country, African Americans and Caucasians use drugs and sell drugs at similar rates.
Exactly.
And, you know, if anything, they're a little bit higher for white people, right? But they're similar, right? So we know the falsehood that people try to paint. But what we're talking about is people in positions of power that are not afraid to use these little tropes and race bait to score political points, you know? And I mean, it's disgusting. And it's all, we always are going to try to have to point it out and hope that people point it out when it affects, you know, minority groups.
Yeah, so I mean, it's I'm happy that I know a lot of different officials and a lot of different individuals have spoken out against this, and this can't be ignored, you know, because of just the reasons that we just mentioned, because this is harmful. And like you said, we it's come from the top, and you still have people just kind of spewing this rhetoric that could be really harmful and impactful. So I'm happy you do have select individuals that are speaking out against it, but it just, I don't know, man, it's like a head shaker moment, man. When you hear some of these things come out, it's just like, I don't know.
Yeah, man.
But you know the goal, and I know the goal of why you know, they go off and say things like that, and I'm just, again, like we mentioned earlier, just concerned about the harmful impact. So we'll continue to monitor, and I'm sure he'll come out and say it's another marginalized group that's causing, you know, the siege or the increase. So we'll continue to see. All right. Moving forward. All right. Getting back into the hip hop entertainment area. All right. So Lil Wayne was recently did a candid interview about mental health and his experiences. So recently he was in an interview with former NFL star and current Spox analyst Emmanuel Acho or Acho. I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, but
Acho, yeah.
Acho. There you go. All right. That's on Uncomfortable Conversation. It's a YouTube series. And in the conversation, Lil Wayne opened up about his mental health experience, and he was very candid about it. And he mentioned that he had first noticed him experiencing mental health struggles, becoming unstable, and having some difficulties around age 10. And he said it all came to a head when he was about 12 years old, when he had some arguments and things with his mother about I think it was about school, and his mother had threatened to keep him from rapping and throw out some of his written material. And you know, he said at that point in time, he said that he really took that to heart, in addition to some of the radical um thoughts that he said he had been having kind of on and off. So he said that it got to one point that he knew that his mom kept a gun like in the drawer. And so he said that he had put the gun in his temple, but he instead shot himself in the chest. And he said it took for the sheriff, because I think he had called the cops right before he had pulled the trigger. And he said it took the cops, or one sheriff in particular named Uncle Bob, that actually ran in there and saved his life. And he said if it was a couple centimeters maybe to the left or to the right, that he would have shot himself in the heart. So he said he had, you know, really had difficulty articulating a lot of his mental health struggles, even when he was a teenager, because he said, you know what, you really have no one to vent to. He said, you know,
Right.
when you're at school, you can't bring it to your friends at school because you're still trying to be cool to them, and you're, you know, not trying to let them know that you got something going on at home. So this was a really dope article. What was your takeaway from it?
I'm gonna jump on right and piggyback right on what you said. The first thing was, I think, stood out the most. Number one, he was talking about how like some of these feelings started when he was like 10, 12 years old, right? And we know one thing, we always tell parents, mentors, what children speak to us through what their behaviors, right? And why do we say that? Lil Wayne articulated it perfectly, right? He said, I couldn't talk to my friends, right? There was not enough support around me, right? I couldn't tell people or articulate the words to talk about what was going on at home. This is why we pay attention to children's background, right? This is why people think teachers and mentors and coaches are nosy. when we're asking, did you eat breakfast? Or how do you get disciplined? Or did your mother ask you, did you have a good day, right? Because these are the things that give you red flags about what is going on at home, right? And so that's why I think it's important that we all check in on our kids, you know. I'm not going to just blatantly say talk to your kids, because when I mean check in, it could be a mentor. It doesn't even necessarily have to be you if you don't have that relationship, right? But providing them with support and resources, and then at the end of the day, coping skills, right? And trying to directly engage them. So that was the first part, you know, just paying attention to their behavior, how they're speaking to us. The second thing is just looking back through the music, right? He said in the article that he talked about how for years he said that it was an accident, right? And going back through the music, like In the Block Is Hot, like on that first album and all through the Hot Boys albums, a lot of his work, he talked about it like it was an accident, right? He always used to kind of like insinuate that it was I don't want to say insinuate it was a little more, so let me not say that. Plus, you know how complicated Lil Wayne raps be sometimes. So, right. But what I'm saying is, even for somebody like him, right, with all that money, all of that, there was still the stigma and the shame and the guilt associated with him shooting himself and not succeeding at it, right? Do you remember the verse he did on that song "Sad"? That on what's Beyonce's sister's name?
Oh, Solange's album, yeah.
He's rapping about that day, right? The whole verse is about him trying to kill himself, and he was like, "Yo, something about, you know, how sad I was on that day," right? And he was talking about after, you know, and a lot of people don't understand how, you know, people who are experience suicidal ideation and go through it and are unsuccessful feel worse, because that's one more thing they were unsuccessful at, right? But I also think it speaks to, you gotta pay attention and reach out and continue to reach out when we know people are in distress, right? Because what did he say before he did it? He called the police, right? And in his mind, he said he was thinking, "I'm gonna show you," to his mother. That's not a person, that's desperation. You understand what I'm saying? That's a person who's had enough. That's a person who's overwhelmed. That's not a person who's ready to quit. We all see how much life he had left in him.
Yeah.
If you ask me, he's the GOAT. You understand what I'm saying? If you ask me, you understand? I respect Jay and all of that, but Lil Wayne is the gatekeeper of a whole nother generation, if you ask me. And he's a GOAT to a whole nother generation. So we know how much life he had in him, so you could never say he was a quitter. You know what I mean? We're talking about an ill-informed opinion, you know? But look at that behavior. He called the police, and in his mind, he was saying, "I'm gonna show mom." That's somebody who's overwhelmed, desperate, reaching out for help. You know what I'm saying? And it's not there. You know, so a very interesting article.
Now, this was a brave and vulnerable conversation, and I appreciate Wayne speaking with so much transparency. You know, outside of some of his lyrics, this is probably the most transparent I've ever seen, you know, in a lot of any of his interviews. And you know, you touched on it a little bit as far as like the lyrics, right? And that's the stigma that rap is often blamed for, right? Rap is often blamed for glamorizing gang culture, money, drugs, violence, misogyny, etc. However, if you listen to a lot of people's lyrics, even his, especially as Wayne has been rapping like more recently, within the past 5-6 years, you know, there's more substance in it, right? You also find within his raps and other people's lyrics is that they articulate a lot of the pain and anguish that they've experienced, right? So they're telling the story. It's not always just about some of those superficial things. Like a lot of these individuals have experienced so much trauma, right, from such an early age. And so that's the part, like you mentioned, is the reaching out. So even as clinician, as therapist, and if you necessarily haven't lived, you know, that particular, you don't come from that background, you haven't lived that life, you know this is why it's so important about what he discussed in the interview, because he's given us an opportunity as clinicians, as people just listening that are in a position to be able to help, to understand the triumphs and the traumas that are experienced by African American boys and men. Right. I mean, you work with a lot of the youth. You know, being able, this is an understanding that enables clinicians, therapists, providers, whatever term you want to use, to really be able to recognize that hopelessness and pain that he had. Right. So he's thinking about, if I lose rap, if I lose music, you see what I mean? That's the frame of mind that he was in. Right.
Even back then.
Right. Even back then, at 10 or 12 years old, that's how important it is for him, because it was therapeutic for him. That's the one thing that he found hope in. So you have to think about, what about some of the other kids that, you know, are in that same position? So this is our ability as clinicians. And like, you know, we've talked about this in previous episodes of, this is the way in, right? This is how we're able to understand all that hopelessness, all the pain that, you know, we might have missed. But you have to really be listening to it, right? You really have to see and really be aware of it. Now, of course, his story and his experience is not the same as every Black kid, but it's not far off either. So there's a significant amount of kids that are experiencing that. So, you know, we've been unfamiliar for so long and asking that, you know, how do we know what to do? How do we explain it? Like, this is it, right? This type of conversation, when you hear the lyrics of a lot of these artists that they're speaking for this generation, right? So now, since they've struggled and they haven't had this outlet, they're using music, right? This is our opportunity as clinicians, as therapists, for us to be like, okay, this is what they're going through. So, you know, I felt like this was, you know, so, you know, on time, and I appreciate Wayne, and I'm happy that not just with him, but overall, like, you know, mental health is getting more of that attention, you know, so society can kind of see, okay, you're seeing the behaviors of what's happening in our community, but why?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
This is the important question that never gets asked, is why? So now, you know, they're being forthright with their struggles and what they've experienced. These are the ones that made it. Right.
Right.
Because there's a whole bunch of other little wins.
That's a profound point.
These are the ones that made it. These are the ones that made it. Right. And they're just telling their story. Right. They're telling a story about what they went through and what a whole lot of other people are going through. So this is why we need to listen up and be aware, because they're providing a window. Right. Now it's like, what do we do with that information? But yeah, hats off to Wayne for being, like you said, he's ushered in through generations, man, since through the late 90s to now. We in 2021, 2022. And he's still, you know what I mean, one of our best spokesmen, our folks that are leading the charge. So I'm loving it.
Listen, Lil Wayne is one of the best representations of why being yourself is always wins, and being original, right? Because I remember a time where he was standing on stage, dressed the way he was dressed, wearing what he was wearing, tattoos on his face, dressed, dyed a certain color, and people was making assumptions that he had a mental health problem. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And 5 years later, everybody looked like that. You understand? And when you look at the trends in music now, everybody has taken a piece and put their own little twist on it. But that's why all of the young artists respect them the way they do it, you know? And in terms of the mental health piece, I agree with you totally, right? Because, and I think what you said was gold, man. It was valuable because he said in this article, I want to help people with problems, mental health problems, by me being vulnerable, right? That means a lot because people hear that, right? And it may mean that somebody would be more likely to reach out to you. Meek Mill going on his Instagram saying, oh, you know, we got to make mental health therapy, you know, cool, you know, palatable for people, whatever, however he wants to phrase it. The point is, it's the exact opposite of calling people weak for having mental health problems.
Exactly.
Right? And in, you know, let's just say, you know, a section of entertainment, of music, you know, where we can say there's a lack of empathy in a lot of ways, to keep it light, for a lot of different things when we talk about violence, when we talk about different things, the criticism some people might have, right? This is one area where we can't criticize rappers, and we actually have to give them their flowers.
Absolutely. You have to.
They have been at the forefront of adolescents, teenagers, and firsthand, because it makes its way to the session. So, I'm personally thankful to all of them.
Absolutely. So yeah, hats off to Wheezy for being at the forefront of this. So staying in the hip hop realm, Kid Cudi recently shared some news, some tragic news of something that took place in his life. He recently shared that with his fans regarding the loss of his dog, Freshie. All right, so he uploaded a lengthy Twitter post. I'm not gonna read the whole thing. I'm just gonna read some aspects of it. But he said, "I got some sad news for y'all. Freshie's gone. He left us a few days ago, peacefully at home, surrounded by his family. I held his hand and whispered in his ear to let him know that I was there when he slipped away. I told him he was my special boy, my best friend, and that he was perfect, and that I loved him, and I'll miss him so much." All right, so Freshie was actually a dog, and he talks about it a little bit in his post. Was a dog that he got back in 2010 when he was filming the HBO series How to Make It in America. And so, for those that aren't familiar with his role on that show, he was like he was the weed guy and the dog walker guy. Now, even though the series was on for I think it was only on for a couple seasons, but it was actually a pretty good show. I remember it.
Yeah, it was. It was a good show, man.
It was a good joint. So yeah, he said himself he was really nervous around dogs, and he said that while on the set while on filming, he said him and Freshie, they hit it off and they became great companions. And so he said he's been with him for 11 years. He's been on with him along his roller coaster of his life, and he said Freshie was with him through it all day. He said he really did. And he came up and he licked me if I was crying. He loved to lay in bed with me. He was always by my side and close by. He was my guardian angel. He said nights when I wanted to cut myself, I'd see Freshie and I couldn't do it. He would stare at me when I would have a knife to my stomach, eyes glaring at me, telling me to put the knife down. My life will be more empty with him gone. And to anyone who has lost a pet, I feel your pain. So this was a tough one to read. Honestly, if anyone has a pet, I'm sure they can imagine who you've ever lost a pet, or you have a pet. This was a tough message, in my heart and prayers, go out to Kid Cudi, for his loss, because pets are part of the family. So Jay, as you read this, because this came in like really right before we went on, and I'm happy you brought this to our attention. So Jay, what were your thoughts about this?
I actually, and I talked to you about this like briefly. Like I actually like stumbled upon it by accident, because when I first read it, I was like, well, why are they writing an article about Kid Cudi's dog dying? Like, no disrespect, we live in America. This is this is a dog loving, country. People love the animals. Like, we joke about it, But then I kind of started seeing, okay, trauma, self-harm, then the seriousness, the heaviness of the topic, right? First, it kind of brought me back to working in behavioral hospitals in Philadelphia. And, used to be like, well, why are they always bringing in these rabbits or dogs, or cats or whatever animals they're bringing, service animals. But the patients, you would have patients who were, I'm not going to say they were catatonic, but you have patients that were like much less responsive than other ones, right? And much less interactive, energetic, all of those things, right?
Yeah, isolation, right?
Right, and you would see the differences sometimes when you would bring those animals into the room, right? I remember one time they brought a rabbit, and what a lot of people I think don't understand about trauma, especially when it's developmental, or especially when it goes on along a long period of time. Sometimes it's easier to connect with an animal than it is to connect with a human being, right? So when you can kind of fix your mind around that and understand that, then you can kind of understand how somebody especially if somebody has a history of self-harm, can really look at a dog as a companion, right? And have a lot of trust in that dog, because a lot of people, especially with self-harm, the times they're going to struggle is not during the day when they're with you. They're with you. You know what I mean? It's when they go home and they're isolated and they're a victim of their own intrusive thoughts, right? And rumination. He's telling that the dog brought him enough comfort where he wouldn't cut himself, then that's a serious social support that you gotta consider and value. You know what I mean? So that's where I kind of went with it, man. Just wow, like that was heavy, man. He's talking about his nights where he had a knife to his stomach and he didn't do it, right? If you think about it, that's where the value of animals come from, right? Because, and this is kind of why, and I'm not comparing animals to children, but this is kind of why we love like little kids that can't talk, right? Because you got the worst day in the world and walk through the door and your little puppy is gonna run up to you and jump on your leg because he don't know that you had a bad day. You know, the same way a 1-year-old, 2-year-old, if they're walking, is gonna grab your leg the same way, right? And these actions bring us comfort, is what I'm saying. So
yeah, I think it's just that all pets, like you mentioned, like with the rabbit, even with cats. But I feel like with dogs, especially, like it's that unconditional, support. Like, a lot of animals, they're indifferent to race, to gender, to clothing, to your SES, your size. They're indifferent to that. It's like, you can feel their love. And like he mentioned, he said, Freshie would get in the bed with him, would look at him, and like you mentioned, like it's usually when you're by yourself when these thoughts start to take place. And that innate ability to know when something's wrong. There's research in it, but it's like this magical calm effect that these animals that they have. And and for them, or for, I guess in his case, for him to be having those severe that as harmful thoughts, and for Freshie to be able to alleviate that stress, that loneliness, that and whatever else that he was experiencing, that's powerful. That's so powerful. And it's an amazing effect that they have on us. And I always even think about just the social recognition aspect that dogs or pets have, but it's especially dogs, because there's a link between pet care and self-care. And that, when you take a dog out for a walk, people talk to you. People will walk up to you. People will be like, "Oh, what kind of dog is that?" Or they make some type of friendly gesture. And, there's like this whole social aspect, like you mentioned, whether you're on a psych unit and they have the pet therapy, or if you're just walking your dog, like there's just that social aspect that, that dog has, not just on you, but just on, people around you. Like it prompts a response of maybe back when you were young and kids, and it's just a whole amazing effect. So this is tough. This is a significant loss for Cudi. And it was a heavy article. And hats off to him also for sharing that with us, because he didn't have to. He could have kept that to himself. But I am happy that he, he did share that with the world, because I feel like that's something that doesn't get talked about enough, is the effect that our pets have, because they are a part of the family. So, but yeah, it's just an amazing magical effect that dogs have. And like you said, you've seen them in the hospitals. I've seen them in the hospitals, and they do great for patients, man. Like you said, you have some of the folks that present with, you know, 23, 24 hours of the day, they're in their room. But when pet therapy comes out, they're there, man. And you see their affect is just brighter. Like I've seen, it's just amazing to see. And that might be just enough to get that patient kind of trending in the right direction, because that's what they're looking forward to while they're on the unit. So so I'm happy he shared that with us. It's great. And I, like you said, thoughts and positive vibes and prayers go out to him and the family as they go through this time.
Yeah, man. I don't have much to add to that. Just it goes a long way in terms of reducing the stigma. So him, Lil Wayne, you know, Meek Mill, all the other artists, you know, Rod Wave, others that are kind of talking about mental health, you know, it's making our job easier. So we appreciate it, right? Increasing access to information and reducing stigma. So we appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, Jay, anything else before we get out of here, good brother?
Nah, man, you know, nothing much, man, nothing else, man. Just want to thank everybody for listening, tuning in. We're going to keep the content coming, so we definitely appreciate everybody taking time out of their day to listen. Please continue to like the videos and we'll keep them coming.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the Black Psychologist Podcast at gmail.com. Continue to, you know, send your statements, any concerns, any questions you guys have. You know, Dr. J and I are always looking to, you know, provide some insight. Again, appreciate everybody's support. Continue to subscribe, and we'll see everybody out there. Speaking of animals, Midnight, you want to get in on this? You want to say hello? Come on. Come say hello to the people. Since we're talking about dogs and stuff. No, you don't want to do it? Okay. Make me look crazy out here. All right, that's cool. All right. Yeah, Jay. So we're out of here, man. Everybody continue to be safe. We're wishing everybody good mental health as we close out the summer. And yeah, that's all I got. All right, good brother.
All right, my brother. Till next time. Later.
All right.